balancing the opportunities and the risks of engineered nanomaterials is really important. But it's not always easy. And sometimes through our research, we discover that what looked like a good idea doesn't work as well as we thought it would. For instance, here's Francis Schwartz on using copper nanoparticles to preserve wood.
Large particles cannot readily penetrate the wood of our native tree species. And therefore it was assumed that the smaller the particle, the better the copper preservative can actually penetrate the wood, and then we have a higher retention and better distribution in the wood.
So you've been looking at how effective copper nanoparticle-based preservatives are. What did you find?
Well, I found them to be comparable with conventional copper-based wood preservatives.
Findings like this might seem a bit disheartening, but they're especially important in helping make informed decisions on how nanotechnology is used most effectively and with the greatest benefits. And in other cases, this balanced approach shows how nanotechnology can be used effectively and safely. Take the use of carbon nanotubes to make strong materials, for instance. Carbon nanotubes are long, thin tubes of carbon atoms that are incredibly strong and light. When they're added to plastics and metals, they can make them much stronger.
Carbon nanotubes have exceptional properties such as high strength and stiffness. If they are put into the polymer matrix, they could form an interconnected network, thus giving rise to stronger structural toughness, flexural modulus, and increased electrical conductivity.
Unfortunately, if these long, thin nanotubes become airborne and are inhaled, they can cause considerable lung damage. And so to be used successfully, it's important to make sure that they stay where they're supposed to. In your research, you looked at what the likelihood was of carbon nanotubes being released when these materials were aged or abraded or cut. What did you find?
We produced a nanocomposite with epoxy and carbon nanotubes. We used aging experiments and immersed these composites into water, exposed them to UV light. In these experiments, we did not observe a release. However, in abrasion experiments, we did observe release. So the particles were released, included the polymer fragments with or without carbon nanotubes, and also a small amount of freestanding carbon nanotubes.
Should we be concerned about this?
We used the abraded particles in a toxicity study. So they are used for the lung cells, and we observed no acute toxic effects. Therefore, we think the effect is very limited.
In the case of carbon nanotube composite materials, there are clear opportunities with using nanotechnology. And while there are important concerns about possible health risks, we discovered that because release and exposure are likely to be very small, the benefits far outweigh what look like negligible risks. This ability to re-engineer common materials and to use them in new ways is a common theme in nanotechnology. Another example is how we can use natural materials in new and interesting ways, like cellulose, for instance.
Cellulose is the most important structural component of all plants. It's actually quite simple to disintegrate wood and isolate the individual nanofibers. They are super stiff and super strong and are therefore of interest to make composites.
And how well do these materials perform?
You can improve the stiffness by a factor of 100 and the strength also by orders of magnitude. So when we started out, the idea was that nanocellulose is safer than engineered nanoparticles because it's a biological material. But at that time, there were no studies available that really supported that hypothesis. In the meantime, we and many others have done experiments that confirm that if used in realistic doses, nanocellulose is much safer than other materials.
Another area that has been attracting a lot of attention is using nanomaterials to increase the performance of lithium-ion batteries.
Nanomaterials in battery have already proven that it can increase the power available from a battery, and second point is decreasing the time required to recharge a battery. The last point is nanostructure can enhance battery life. So we are mainly focusing on cathode nanomaterials, and also we focus on bio and environmental assessment using these nanomaterials.
So you're working with these new nanomaterial electrodes. How big of an improvement have you seen in the performance of your batteries?
So we have big enhancements in capacity and energy in weight and in volume. And also we could recharge our batteries in shorter time compared to micron size.
Whether we're designing better batteries, creating strong materials, or developing better ways of treating disease, the NRP 64 program has shown us the tremendous opportunities that exist with engineered nanomaterials. But we'll only be able to take full advantage of the opportunities of these technologies if we learn to use them responsibly.